Good morning everyone and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to show how to set up Visual Studio Code to work with a remote Git repository hosted on Visual Studio Team Services. The first thing you have to do is getting your account on Visual Studio Team Services. So go to visualstudio.com, sign in for the service and create your free account. It is free up to 5 members in your development team. Once you have your account ready, you can click New to create a new team project. This is the very first step you have to do to set up a remote Git repository. Let's provide a project name such as VS Code. Here you can provide an optional description such as sample Git remote repository. Make sure the version control engine is Git. Then click Create Project. Creating a team project requires just 1 minute or so. Okay, let's click Navigate to the project. Visual Studio Team Services is now showing a welcome page. We have a couple of shortcuts here, but we have to click Add Code. The new repository is ready, but it's empty. We have an option to clone this repository in Visual Studio, but this is not what we are going to do today. Here you can see the URL of the remote Git repository just created. You can copy to the clipboard this URL. It will be useful for the VS Code configuration in a couple of minutes, so keep it somewhere. The next step is configuring Git credentials. You can use a credential manager, a client credential manager, but a very good option is creating an access token. This is because Visual Studio Code will require an access token rather than username and password. So let's click Generate Git credentials and then create a personal access token. In this page, you will see the list of all the access tokens you have for any Visual Studio Team Services accounts you are subscribed to. Let's click Add to create a new access token. Let's provide a description, for example, VS Code. Select the expiration, for example, 1 year. And then make sure you select the VSTS account where your remote repository is. Now we have to specify the permissions for this token, so let's click Selected Scopes. Then make sure you select Build, Code, and Work Items. This is important because with Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio Team Services you can also manage work items. Let's click Create Token. At this point you will see your new access token. This is the only time you will be able to see this token. So make sure you copy the token and make sure you save the token somewhere for later usage. Okay, now we have everything we need to set up Visual Studio Code to work with this remote repository. The first thing we need at this point is a sample application, and I'm going to create this with the command line. All the steps described in this video apply to any kind of project you can open with the Visual Studio Code. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to create a new ASP.NET Core sample project with the .NET command line. I have a command prompt here on an empty folder, and I'm going to create a subfolder for my new sample app. Then I'm going to enter this new subfolder. Then to create a new ASP.NET Core application, I'm going to type .NET new T, which means type web. This will create a new web application. Alright, the ASP.NET Core C# application is ready in my folder. Let's go to VS Code at this point and let's click Open Folder or File, Open Folder to open the newly created sample application. Okay. VS Code is telling us that some required assets are missing, so it offers to create them. Let's click Yes. VS Code is telling us that some NuGet packages are missing, so let's click Restore. While VS Code is restoring NuGet packages, let's make a couple considerations. The first thing we have to do is go into the extension panel, search for the Visual Studio Team Services extension. In this case, I have already installed this extension, so I don't need any additional steps, but if you have not installed these extensions yet, you have to search for it in the search panel, Visual Studio Team Services. You will see the extension in the list. When ready, you will click install, and once the extension will be installed, Visual Studio Code will restart and will reopen the newly created application. The next step is configuring a local Git repository for the sample application. As you might know, Git works with both a local and a remote repository. So the first thing we need is a local Git repository. Let's click Initialize, and let's make a first commit. This will send all the pending changes to the local Git repository. Now we need to associate this new project to the remote repository we created before. To do this, we open again the command line and we will type a couple of lines using the Git command line interface. Make sure that the command prompt is open to the folder that contains the sample application. So let's type git remote add origin and the URL of the remote repository. This associates the current sample project to the remote repository. The next line is git push u origin master. This will push all the local files to the remote repository into the branch called master. Let's press enter and let's wait a couple of minutes. Okay, so now our source code has been synchronized with the remote repository. The next step is configuring the Visual Studio Team Services extension for Visual Studio Code to work with the remote repository. More specifically, we need to provide our credentials. As you can see in the status bar, there is a new icon called Team, which means that Visual Studio Code is recognizing that there is a remote repository configured for the current project, but that is missing authentication. So let's click Team, or as an alternative, you can open the command line and type team login. And here you have to provide the access token you created a few minutes ago. So let's go to select the token, team login, and let's enter this token. After a few seconds, you will see that the team icon is replaced with the name of your remote repository. So VS Code has been able to recognize that a remote repository based on Git has been created for the current project. So now you have both the local and the remote repository. You have additional icons here which allow you to manage work items and other things that I'm not going to discuss this time. One important icon is the synchronization icon, which allows you to share your changes from the local repository to the remote repository. So, for example, we can click this icon and the synchronization has been completed. Now let's make just one change. For example, we can add just a comment, or we can remove unnecessary using directives. By the way, new sample application. All right, let's save this file. Here we have a pending change. Let's click commented code and we press Ctrl and Enter to commit the changes locally. As you can see, the icon has changed here, which means there are some changes that need to be synchronized. Let's click here. Let's wait just 1 minute. All right. Now let's go back to the remote repository. Let's click the project name. And here we go. As you can see, the source code of the sample application has been pushed to the remote Git repository. And you can also see how the change we made in the code has also been pushed. Now this is great if you work alone, but you probably are working within a team if you are setting up VS Code with Visual Studio Team Services. So let's see how to clone a remote Git repository to a local machine for Visual Studio Code usage. I'm going to do this on a Mac. I have here my Mac, and I'm working on a TeamViewer just for convenience. Here I have an empty folder. This is where I'm going to clone the remote repository. What I can do here is right-click, new terminalet folder. This is an option that you have to configure in the system preferences. Now I have my command line, and I can simply type git clone and paste the URL of my remote Git repository on Visual Studio Team Services. When I press enter, I will be required to enter my email address, the email address that is registered with my Visual Studio Team Services account. At this point, I will be required to enter the password. The password is actually the access token. So let's go here and let's make this passed. Notice that Mac does not show any characters for any kind of passwords, so you will just see a white space. No worries, just press enter. Great. The remote Git repository has been cloned into a local folder. So let's close the bash. Let's open this folder. And here you can see the cloned Git repository. I can now open VS Code, open folder. Let's select the newly cloned repository and let's click open. So on my Mac, the .NET command line interface is not installed yet, but this is not very important at this point. What you can now do is making changes in your code, commit your changes, and push your changes to the Visual Studio Team Services remote repository. One step you have to do before you do this is, of course, configuring the access security for the Visual Studio Team Services extension. Okay. Great. You are now connected to the remote repository on your Visual Studio Team Services account. Then you can restore your NuGet packages, and of course you have to install before the .NET command line interface tools, but now you can fully collaborate with your team in VS Code and on a totally different operating system. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I really hope you are enjoying Visual Studio Code. Thank you.